This is Money Moves on VSiN, the sports betting network.
JVT flying solo today with you. That was not third person, just letting you know who is with you. Stormy Buonantony is on the road. She's actually up in the air right now, traveling to Starkville as she is getting set to stock the sidelines for Mississippi State and Arizona State. It's actually a reason why I bring that up, not only because this is Money Moves and you're used to her bringing us back, but because our next guest has a thought on that matchup. It's at a perfect place to start. Ryan McIntyre with us, the college experience at Moneyline_Mac up on Twitter. All right, Stormy's going to be out there checking out Mississippi State and Arizona State up close. What is she in for coming up on Saturday, Ryan?
Appreciate you having me on first, but yeah, I think Stormy's in for quite a game. We've seen movement on this game come down from 10 all the way through 7, now sitting at 6.5. They played last year in Tempe, Arizona State, the magical year, Sam Levin and company, Cam Scadaboo. But I like the home dog here. I was extremely impressed with Mississippi State going into Hattiesburg last week and really controlling the line of scrimmage. Year 2 of Jeff Lebby. He's got Shapen back at the quarterback position. I actually think she may see a field storm here. I think Mississippi State's going to knock off Arizona State with that low number next to them. And we see this in college football where you go from the hunter to the hunted. Arizona State playing on a new role here, expected to win, now having to go into SEC country in Starkville. I think that's going to be a raucous environment, and I like the home team to pull off the upset here in an entertaining game.
All right, let's go to another matchup. I mentioned this going out of our last break. For a second straight week, there is some Baylor support in the market. Will it get there this time? SMU opened up as about a 4.5 point favorite, depending on where you look. We're down to 2.5 in multiple spots with a total of 63.5.
Yeah, and honestly, I had Baylor last week, and I kind of was a little bit bitter with the way it kind of ended. I thought that they moved the ball at will, but just 2 possessions inside the 5-yard line, only walk away with 3 points out of those 2 possessions. Give up a kick return when they cut it to 7. It just felt like they never could seize the momentum of that game. And I just also think that they're going to be able to move the ball on SMU at will like they did last week against Auburn. Robertson almost threw for, 450 yards. I really like this offense under Spavital. Compared to SMU, who I was not impressed with against Texas A&M Commerce last week. They gave up 350 through the air. I think Baylor wins a track meet here. I think this is going to be a really entertaining game, and you can just see that with the total sitting at 63.5. So give me the Bears to bounce back in a little foxhole desperate spot. Don't want to fall to 0-2.
Yeah, a lot of people keep talking about week 2. It's like, oh, this is tough. There's not that many. I think there's a lot of great spots here that are going to be really interesting. Yeah, as we move into week 3. Let's talk about another one, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Illinois laying under a key number here at Circa, but it's shaded to the favorite side. On the road against Duke, there's plenty of 3s, 2.5s, whatever you want you can get. What do you think of this matchup?
Yeah, so similar to Arizona State, Illinois is in a new role here. That number next to your name, not used to being in that role, hunter to the hunted. And I think the disrespect for Duke has gone a little bit too far. I think that this is a really good team as well. Yes, Illinois won 9 games last year, but so did Duke. Manny Diaz, they went out and got some dudes in the portal on the defensive side of the football. I think they're able to neutralize the line of scrimmage here. Bielema teams offensively want to run the ball, control the line of scrimmage, but I think Duke can really hang with them in the trenches. And Duke's been really, really good, the best team in the ACC at home over the years. I think we have the better quarterback here with Menta on the Duke side. I think Duke is also going to knock off Illinois, so I think we're going to see some dogs barking tomorrow in week 2.
All right, it's one of those dogs, Iowa against Iowa State.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
The dog's always barking in that game. This is one of my favorite games out of the year. And to your point, a lot of people were throwing shade at this week 2 slate, but it's games like this that make college football. Both of these teams are playoff contenders in the 12-team playoff. Last year, Iowa State beats them on 19-17 on a 57-yard field goal at the Horn, a game that Iowa really controlled. Iowa's won 5 in a row in Ames. They really controlled this rivalry in the Ferentz versus Campbell era. I know a lot of people love some Iowa State right now after Farmageddon and that South Dakota game, but I like the road team here once again, getting over a field goal. Give me the hook there, 3.5. I don't know if they're going to win the game outright, but this game's always 20-19, 17-16, so I'll take the dog here.
So I'm curious, just the general handicapping philosophies before we get into some more games. And Ryan McIntyre is with us here discussing the college football slate. How do we handle some of these teams that are playing programs that they didn't want to show much and they didn't show much? I mean, you mentioned the awful passing attack for Iowa in that first matchup. Duke didn't look overtly impressive. I think you make an argument Oklahoma looked pretty mundane at times. But how do you handicap that and not dwell too much on it as they move into now real competition, we'll call it?
I think if you see, for example, you're talking about Duke and Iowa, where you kind of and throw West Virginia in there with Robert Morris last week, where you kind of struggle through the first half. Maybe you got some turnover variance that goes against you, but then you go into the locker room, you reset, and then I think you come out blazing and really hit some home runs. I think that's a sign of maybe just first game jitters, first game nerves, maybe not trying to open it up compared to the other team with the FCS where it's their Super Bowl. So I think as long as they turned it on a little bit in the second half, I think there's some encouraging things headed into week 2.
All right, well, Oklahoma had a 35-3 win over Illinois State, and now they get Michigan. Can Underwood pull off the upset on the road, or is this going to be one where Brent Venables is going to get a very big marquee win?
I think Venables is going to get a big marquee win. Defensive mind. The problem with Oklahoma last year was not their offense. I mean, Venables' defenses are always really good. Now Mateer's there. They got a game under their belt. He comes over with his offensive coordinator from Wazoo. And I'm going to keep back in this trend. I've done this for years. It was fade Arch on the road in his first start, fade Ty Simpson on his first road start, down in Tallahassee, fade Carr going to Miami. I'm going to fade Bryce Underwood in his first true road start in Norman, and what will be a crazy atmosphere. I think Oklahoma can get after him defensively, and they'll make enough plays offensively. I'll lay the 4.5 with the Sooners.
What'd you think of Underwood in his start over there in Ann Arbor against New Mexico? Like, big picture, as we zoom out and look at what he can be, what do you think the ceiling is after seeing one game with him?
I think he's going to be really good. He just pops. Sometimes you just see the raw talent. I think there will be growing pains just because he is a freshman. But I mean, I don't think they're a national championship and Big Ten contender this year. But comes back next year, get some more weapons around, and watch out for Big Blue over there to bounce back like they had with those teams under Harbaugh.
All right, let's talk a little SEC here. Ole Miss on the road against Kentucky, a matchup that might mean quite a bit for the Rebels after what happened a season ago. They are now 9-point favorites, though, total of 50.5 after sitting at 10 for a good chunk of the week.
Yeah, we'll continue that trend here. I mean, Austin Simmons, the Ole Miss young quarterback, he's as talented as anybody, but first true road start. Kentucky, under Stoops, for whatever reason, has really messed with Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss offense. They're able to drag him in the mud here. The last 3 games, including last year when they won outright, is a 17-point underdog, has always been a one-possession game. So I like Big Blue to be able to control the line of scrimmage, run the football. They ran for over 200 yards last week. Just need Calzada to make a throw or two. But I like that Kentucky defense with Stoops. I think that they're live here. So I'm going to take that 9.5 with Kentucky to really mess with Ole Miss once again and maybe spoil their college football playoff back-to-back years already.
Yep. All right, right under it on the rotation, 343, 344, Kansas and Missouri. This one looks like it's going to be great. 6.5 the spread in favor of Mizzou. Total is 51 or 50.5. Stormy and I have been singing the praises of this Kansas team. Think they're a little underrated even through 2 weeks against lesser competition. What do you make of this spot here for the Jayhawks?
Yeah, I love the Jayhawks. I'll co-sign that with you. Jalen Daniels back with Coltonicki, disciple at the offensive coordinator position. It took him half of last year to really come back to his old self off that back injury. And he was playing in Grimes' system, which never really fit him. So people forget, Kansas in the second half of the year knocked off every single Big 12 contender, Iowa State, Colorado, BYU. They were a top 5 team with just a bad record in the Big 12 last year. They really controlled that Fresno game. This is an old hatred Big 12 old rivalry, the border war here. This is going to have a lot of juice to it. It's going to be chippy. But I like the Jayhawks, definitely give them the 6.5. I'm going to sprinkle on that plus 200 money line because I think they have the better quarterback and they have the better coaching staff. So give me the Jayhawks against Mizzou.
Again, Ryan McIntyre with us, host of the College Experience Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Let's talk a little bit about Michigan State. Is this the same thing? Played Western Michigan. Aiden Childs didn't look overtly impressive. Now here you have a tight one against Boston College. Spread across the board, 3.5, total 45.5.
Yeah, I'm going to back Sparty here. I liked what I saw from Michigan State in the first half, and then they kind of just went through the motions. Ridiculous non-cover if you had Sparty minus the points, and the backup comes in and throws a pick six. So first bad beat of the year there. But I like Sparty here. Year two, Jonathan Smith, Childs back in his offense. This is a revenge angle too. BC beat him in a fun game last year, us up there in Chestnut Hill. So I think Michigan State a little bit farther as a program here. Under the lights here, I like a discount here, getting under a touchdown with Sparty.
All right, and in our last 60 seconds, you dare go against Vandy in the dog roll here, huh? Virginia Tech, a 2-point favorite, totals 46.5.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a crazy year. I mean, last year, Virginia Tech opens as a 13-point favorite at Vanderbilt, loses outright. Now you get them the next year at Lane, under the lights, enter Sandman, under a field goal. I'm going to hold my nose, take Brent Pry. I thought they looked good against South Carolina. It was just that punt return that really broke it open. Drones has got to be a little bit better than 15-35, but I like the Hokies to get the revenge on Diego Pavia. I hate going against my guy Pavia, but I'll say gobble, gobble, go Hokies here.
It's a great point about the change in the number from site change, everything else, and pretty similar teams from a year ago. And, of course, everybody knows now how Pavia has done in that dog roll. Ryan, good to talk to you as always, man. Thank you very much for the time today.
Appreciate it, John. Have a great weekend.
Yep, you got it again. Ryan McIntyre, College Experience, Sports Gambling Podcast Network. All right, when we come back, coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll have Zach Cohen with us. Let's take our look at some of these games. We have some NFL angles to get to, some new injuries that have popped up for some of these matchups in Week 1, and some angles on college. So don't go anywhere. It's Money Moves here on VSiN.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
So there's a lot to get to. We have news in the National Football League. I wanted to run this by our audience, though, very quickly before we get to some of the news coming out of the NFL. I texted this to one Will Hill after we discussed some college football with him. And at me, JVT, up on X, if you want to give me your feedback on this angle coming up this weekend in college football. So, as you know, I enjoy a little bit of Mountain West football. New Mexico. Let's talk about the Lobos really quickly. They just went out to Ann Arbor, had a tough loss, kind of got beat up in the other downs outside of some, I don't want to call them fluky, but we will say magical touchdown drives against the Michigan Wolverines. They're back home against Idaho State. So why I am intrigued here, for those who do not know, New Mexico is just essentially Idaho 2.0 from last year. When you look at Jason Eck coming in, taking over the program, Eck, of course, had been at Idaho for a few years, brings in the quarterback. I believe his son plays interior linebacker. He had played at Idaho. There's a lot of different connections back to Idaho for this New Mexico team. In the year of the transfer, not really surprising. You see it in basketball more often, where a guy will leave a program, and because, of course, 5 guys on the floor, I need some dudes, he'll take some of his dudes with him. It was the same thing here for New Mexico. So my whole angle here, my intrigue, is this essentially a faux rivalry game that we don't really care about or know about, because you have a bunch of dudes with ties to the Idaho program in New Mexico uniforms because their head coach moved on to a better, into D1 with the New Mexico Lobos. It's an added game. Haven't seen anything yet, but it was an old rivalry spot, I believe, called the Battle of the Domes. Idaho dominated Idaho State last year, 40-17, I believe was the final score. But I do wonder if there's something here where Idaho, who has largely dominated Idaho State each of the last 3 seasons, they've won 4 straight in the rivalry, maybe has something in terms of wanting to put it on Idaho State, not only because of the hidden rivalry aspect of it, despite the fact that there's different uniforms involved, but also just due to the fact that if you look at what New Mexico went through last week, I actually think there's some sneaky upside to the Lobos. I kind of liked a little bit of what I saw from them against Michigan in this grand scheme of things in the Mountain West. Maybe could be pretty plucky and trying to, because you're not going to be in a position to do this very often, maybe get a pretty big win here. So I'll be interested to see what the number is once we get there. But I thought it was an interesting angle looking at that Idaho State angle to this and the fact that a bunch of these former Idaho players are in New Mexico uniforms as they transferred over. So at me, JVT up on X. I would love some thoughts on that. I think it's an interesting angle. I don't know if maybe I'm looking too much into it, but we'll see what the number is. But before the line moves, a little bit of advice for you. The sharp plays already there. They don't just follow the market. They help move it, folks. So before we get to the NFL, I want to remind you that you're not going to outsmart billion-dollar sports books or full-time sharps on your own. But with the sharp plays, you don't have to. Powered by advanced AI and plugged into trusted insider sources, the Sharp Plays delivers the edge serious bettors use every day. Free betting reports, real-time alerts, and market-moving insights sent straight to your inbox or X feed. It's not some weekend hobby. Since 2011, the Sharp Plays has delivered documented results, public logs, and transparent receipts. SharpPlays.com, trusted by pros, watched by the books. Visit SharpPlays.com and stay ahead of the lines. All right, the news today that is very much worth looking at. Let's go to the NFL, where the Las Vegas Raiders are set to take on the New England Patriots this coming weekend. We got a little bit of news about an hour ago, not involving the weird situation with Amari Cooper in the wide receiver room for the Las Vegas Raiders, but the fact that Christian Gonzalez, cornerback for the New England Patriots, officially ruled out for the season opener against the Las Vegas Raiders. Seemed like it was heading in this direction for a while for Gonzalez. Had been dealing with this injury. None of the words coming out of Mike Vrabel's mouth over the last couple of days seemed soaked with positivity. This was going to be a situation where it seemed like this was likely. I think it's a small reason why we're starting to see those 2.5s appear across the board. But total number right now, when you're looking at it in its totality in terms of the consensus number, 2.5 shaded to the favorite side with a total of 44. With the loss of Gonzalez, not surprising that maybe you see this total tick up the way that it did. It was as low as 41.5, reached as high as 45. Now we've balanced out a little bit here at 44. The line history I'm rattling off here at Circa. So there's a few things. First and foremost, I was very, very bullish on the New England Patriots in the heat of the offseason as you looked at it. However, the more you look at the way this team is priced and where the market is, and there has been some cooling, I think, on the general consensus of New England as well, I do understand why you would probably, maybe, if you're me, pump the brakes on what you expect of this team heading into this year, given the expectations tied in with the betting market. I think Las Vegas is going to be somewhat live here to give the New England Patriots a run for their money, potentially steal a win on the road. As we have discussed, I'm not the biggest on the west-east travel. It's not that big of a deal in my mind when you're talking about body clock, getting guys right, all the sort of things. I think it's a little bit more of an old-school angle than anything else. I think Las Vegas, with the strengths that they have at wide receiver and tight end, I understand the whole angle of, hey, Geno Smith didn't really play that well outdoors. This isn't in inclement weather. We are still in this summer sort of conditioning where it's not going to be as daunting to play in some sort of situation like that. I think Las Vegas's offense, especially now with the loss of Gonzalez in the secondary, is going to be pretty live to put the Raiders in position to win this game. Obviously, Ashton Genty is going to be a very big part of this game plan for the Las Vegas Raiders too. But do wonder if you start to lean a little bit more on Geno Smith and this offense. And you do wonder what a role is like for a guy like Jacoby Myers. I don't know if you saw the footage the other day where he was asked about the time that he requested his trade a couple of weeks ago. His response was, I asked, they said no. So I don't know what the dynamic is like. Maybe that's something that I'm not accounting for enough, that there would be some off vibes that would lead to a lackluster performance for the Raiders. Shocking that would happen for this franchise. But I do think, given that Chip Kelly is calling the shots here, Carroll is a very good coach. He's going to have this defense ready to go. Up front, this is the real question. You obviously invested in your offensive line in the offseason, both with the draft and free agency, but this is a relatively strong pass rushing defensive line for the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that's something that can be had when you're talking about being able to put yourself in position to maybe mask some of the issues for your secondary. And the other part is, this isn't exactly an offense and a wide receiver core that is rife with talent at the skilled positions that would be able to test such a secondary. So I think all of this puts together for me, I think these two teams are closer to, and actually, in fact, I think they are equals to one another. You're going to give me this 2.5 point range. I think the Raiders are going to be pretty live to steal this thing from the New England Patriots. So I wanted to expand this out. How does this game get played? Because I mentioned this yesterday in talking with Stormy, and we brought this up on the air. One of the things that I want to look into a little bit more this season is, and we'll do this on Fridays, maybe paper trading a little bit, some of these defensive player props, which we don't talk about enough. We talk a lot about these anytime touchdowns. We talk about the receiving props, rushing props, quarterback props. But there is a whole market that, if you're really paying attention to it, and if you can do a good job, not saying that I can, we'll find out this year if we can or not, that you can dive into some of these. So I thought there was a couple of names that stuck out when you're looking at these. And since we're here, I might as well just bring this to the forefront. Robert Spillane was one of the names that I was looking at for this matchup, and specifically for some of these tackle props. So his number, tackles and assists, 8.5. Shaded to the under. If you want to bet it over, it's minus 107. Spillane, of course, coming from Las Vegas over to New England to fill the role of linebacker, already winning the role of a team captain as well. But given what we just talked about, I would assume that part of the game plan is to test this secondary without Christian Gonzalez. But we know what Pete Carroll likes to do. We know what Chip Kelly wants to do. This is going to be, I think, and it shouldn't be, but I think it will be, a high-volume rushing attack with Ashton Jeanty in this matchup. That's going to put Spillane, who is an absolute tackling machine, not exactly the greatest defender in the world, but is going to be in position. He's going to be on the field. He's going to get the attempts to rack up tackles and assisted tackles against Ashton Jeanty in this running attack, which, by the way, this rushing game last year, we'll see how much Jeanty actually improves it, was statistically one of the worst in the NFL when you're talking about efficiency, expected points added. I think Spillane's going to be in position, it would seem, if we're following that game script, to rack up quite a few tackles and assists. So thought 8.5, albeit a somewhat high number, and kind of looking around at the different markets for this. I think he's going to be in a position to win this. So small dog price at minus 107, but Spillane to go over those 8.5 tackles and assists, I thought was there in a somewhat interesting aspect. So that's one of the four that I like here. Let's go to Pittsburgh and New England. Similar concept in trying to gauge how this is going to go from a game script standpoint. Obviously, when you look at the New York Jets and their new offense, this is going to be something. I think I said Pittsburgh and New England, by the way, Pittsburgh and the New York Jets. With the Jets' new offense and ties to what the Lions were trying to do, or have done, I should say it, this is going to be a team that, again, is going to, I think, facilitate their offense through the ground game. You also have the added aspect of Justin Fields, a mobile quarterback who, on these short fourth downs, is going to be quite the weapon against some of these defenses. And I think there's going to be more opportunities than not for a guy like Patrick Queen to get some tackles against a team that wants to run the ball. He's got a 7.5 tackles and assists over minus 137. And then Cody Barton, same thing here, over 6.5 tackles and assists minus 125 for the Tennessee Titans. I think this is actually a little bit more interesting in the sense that if Denver, and we'll have more on this when we come back after we talk to Zach Cohen, but if Denver's going to be in this position where the market believes they might be 8.5-point favorites, maybe leading this game by a wide margin, really rough spot to be in if you're Tennessee, if they're getting smoked in the second half, that would also mean that Denver is going to lean a little bit more on its ground game, especially in that second half, and more opportunities for a guy like Barton to rack up some tackles and assists. So again, this is kind of a new market for me. I know a lot of you probably already are tackling it. I get it. But I do want to dive into it a little bit more on a week-to-week basis. We'll get some more on that when we wrap the show. On the other side, though, Zach Cohen's going to be with us, get his thoughts on football, tennis. We're going to cover all bases here on Money Moves on a Football Friday.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
A little bit of news, non-news, maybe not. New York Giants, Washington Commanders this coming weekend. News today. Malik Neighbors did not practice. It is back tightness, but he is expected to play. Just put that on your radar for Sunday. We are a couple of days away. But we head back out to the Progressive Yes Line and welcome in a stranger and a father. How about this? Zach Cohen is with us here. He's been writing on the website, although he's been on a little bit of paternity leave. What's up, buddy? Good to talk to you. NBA season around the corner, but our audience, don't turn away. We are doing all football here for the most part. I should ask, and I am told I should ask this question. We did have a matchup just get started. Djokovic and Alcaraz getting started right now. We are still pretty early on here. Any early takeaways, anything in game or in match you would be looking for between these two?
Yeah, I mean, I still like Djokovic to win a set. I took that at -200 pre-match. Alcaraz is up an early break and is probably going to, hold on to it. But you could probably get a better price than I did. So I think that I would still take Djokovic to win a set. I think he's going to kind of settle in as a server. He did not serve very well in that first game, and I think he's going to settle into the match. And I think he's going to get a little bit better as it gets a little cooler. So I think in like an hour and a half is when he'll be peaking. Even though I know he's the older player, and maybe if this goes 5 sets, that favors Alcaraz. But not a traditionally good day match player, so I think the later it gets, the better he gets.
All right, and anything worth mentioning in the other men's semifinal today? Sinner is a -2,500 favorite.
Yeah, it's an outrageous price, but he just beat him 6-0, 6-2 2 weeks ago in Cincinnati. So we have a very, very recent, example of the way these two match up against one another. I would be looking at like an ace prop if you can. I wrote it up for the website. Sinner +2.5 aces against Auger-Aliassime is something I'm interested in. Auger-Aliassime did not ace him once when they met in Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago. That will change. I mean, Auger-Aliassime is a very good server, but the stats don't say that he's that much better of a server than Sinner, and Sinner's a much better returner. So I'd be, surprised if the Italian doesn't kind of just get his bracket on more serves. So I think +2.5 is a really generous number.
VSiN.com, check that out. Zach pretty much has written every single word up on the website. Him and Adam Burke doing a tremendous job there. And the write-ups for the U.S. Open, every tennis event, are always up there. So let's get a preview. Tomorrow we get the women's final. Sabalenka is taking on Anisimova. Right now about a $2 favorite. Sabalenka is here in this final matchup, +160 coming back. Is there anything on the basic win outright market, or are there some derivatives you can find here that are worth playing?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday on the picks page, I gave out Anisimova to win the tournament at +400 before she played Osaka. I do think she's going to win this match, so I'd still be looking for ways to attack it. I'd probably take the set spread +1.5 at around -150 and go a little bigger on that, then put a little bit on the money line at around +200. But this is a head-to-head history that has really favored Anisimova. We just saw her beat Sabalenka at Wimbledon. She's now 6-3 against Sabalenka in her career, has won 2 of their last 3 matches, and in 7 of the 9 matches they have played, Anisimova has won at least a set, which is why I'd go bigger on that set spread. I just think this is one of the few players in the world that kind of has the power to play with Sabalenka, but she's also serving really well in New York. Maybe the best server in the tournament so far. And I do think that the way she matches up from the baseline is very, very favorable. And then I'll also add on top of that, Sabalenka has had some demons playing against Americans in New York. She does not like being, the villain to the crowd. She's a very nice person, a very funny person. She does not like being painted as the villain, and I do think that we're going to see some of that come into play at some point. It came into play against Pegula last match, and I thought that Pegula gave her a really good run for her money.
All right, Sabalenka and I have something in common. I don't like being in New York. Zach Cohen with us. You can follow him on Twitter at Betting on X, and, of course, joining us on the Progressive Guest Line. All right, let's get to football. We got a couple of games that you like. Let's start in the NFL because we do have a game tonight. Chiefs and Chargers out there in Brazil. Current number right now in the NFL matchup, 3, shaded to the favorite side here at Circa. Totals 47.5. We are still waiting on news and some clarity on Mekhi Becton, who came down with an illness today. But what do you make of what we have so far? Did you like anything here?
Yeah, I mean, I took over 44.5 way back when. I mean, I'm writing these up on Tuesdays, so sometimes I'm getting better numbers than you'll see later in the week, and sometimes I'm getting worse numbers, but I do write them up on Tuesdays. So if you're interested in what I have, definitely check out my writer page. But I do think this is going to be a higher scoring game in general. I believe what we're hearing out of Kansas City, that they want to open up the offense, and even though Rashee Rice is going to be out these first couple of weeks, Hollywood Brown is back. This is year 2 of Xavier Worthy, and I think that Kelsey has a little bit more left in the tank than people are giving him credit for. So I think Mahomes has a big game today, and I also think Herbert has a good game against the Chiefs. And I do think that in the end, I give a slight lean to Kansas City on the side, whether that's -2.5 or the money line, just because narrative speaking, I do trust Mahomes late in a big game over Herbert. But I do think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a little high scoring. And if you're looking for player props, I wrote it up over 4.5 for Travis Kelce. Receptions is something I'd be looking at. Kelce has gone over that number, I believe, in 8 straight games against the Chargers. Just, they've had a lot of trouble defending him. And I do think that with Rice out, that's still going to be the go-to guy for Mahomes.
Yeah, Worthy was a guy that I was pretty interested in looking at. He closed the season out really strong for Kansas City, and like his PFF grade was increasing almost every single week. And then obviously the last 2 playoff games was incredible for Kansas City. So we'll see if that continues on here in Brazil. So earlier in our program today, we did have some anti-Colts sentiment from one Will Hill. I don't think this is going to be full anti-Colts, but there is maybe some lashings of that in your analysis here. Miami is in a pick situation, total of 46 against Indy.
I actually like the Colts to win this game. I mean, I'm not taking that. I ended up playing over 44.5, but I'm more pro Colts than anti-Colts, if anything. I think that Jones is going to look a lot better in a Steichen offense. I think that he's a little bit more accurate than Richardson is. I think that he's got the legs to kind of give them that mobility they need. I think this offense is going to look a lot better with him under center. So I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, especially from the Indianapolis side. I know you're very high on Josh Downs this week. I think he's going to have a big game. I also think, Warren and Pittman are also going to have their looks in this one as well. I do not like what Miami did in the offseason. I think that they have, a good-looking pass rush, but I think the swaps that they made and losing Ramsey, bringing in Fitzpatrick, there's going to be a little bit too much freelancing in that secondary for me. So I think there's going to be opportunities for the Colts to beat them over the top, and I think Miami's going to score as well. I mean, the Colts are, a solid defensive team, not great. So, I'm just expecting a lot of points in this game. I think it's going to be, closer to a shootout.
Yeah, I think Miami's secondary is going to be really bad, and that pass rush better be incredible if they're going to be able to mask some of those issues. All right, before we move on from the NFL, was there anything else you were looking at? Were you waiting for a number? Was there anything else on your radar for the Week 1 slate?
I have Rams -2.5 against the Texans. I just don't trust that Houston offensive line. I think that what they did in the offseason, I think moving Tunsil out, hoping for, internal development and for younger guys to just step in and, play high level, play at that left tackle spot. That's really tough. And I think that Stroud struggled last year without having protection. I think the running game is going to be worse with Mixon being, out. I just don't really see what there is to like against a Rams team that I think is going to be really good this season. I know, there's some question marks with Stafford heading into the year, but I really don't worry too much about this team. And like I said, I think that defensive line for Los Angeles going against a weak Houston offensive line, that's probably the biggest mismatch in the game. So I think it's going to be a game that the Rams win somewhat comfortably.
All right, I like it. Let's go over to college. Big game of the weekend is going to be at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Illinois taking on Duke. Blue Devils catching 2.5 or 3 with a total of 49. What do you got here?
I love Duke. I mean, I took it at +3.5, but I would still take it at money line if you had to, honestly, or just buy up from 2.5 to 3.5. I just think that this Manny Diaz defense is going to be very good this year. It's an aggressive scheme. He blitzes quarterbacks a lot. Last year, Luke Altmaier struggled against the blitz, and this Fighting Illini team, they want to run the ball. Duke is not an easy team to run on, and now you're talking about a Duke team that suddenly has, Darian Mensah at the quarterback spot and some good wide receivers around him. So I think you're talking about a Duke team that was very good defensively last season. Now they have some explosiveness in the passing game. This is just a really difficult spot for Illinois. I know that a lot of people had the Illini as a college football playoff team. Maybe they still make it, but I had Duke's win total over this year, and I think this is a spot that they're going to feel really good about winning.
All right, before we get you out of here, Utah State, Texas A&M, I know you played this earlier on the total, but still love to hear your logic here as the Aggies totals up to 57.
I would maybe still go over on that total. I mean, I'd have to look into it a little bit more. I took over 54.5. You're hearing the dog barking right now, not the baby. Right. But I think that this is going to be a game where both teams are going to just have a lot of success moving the ball. I think Utah State, they have a Power 4 transfer quarterback in Bryson Barnes who, started games at Utah. He knows what he's doing against defenses like this. Bronco Mendenhall is a very good offensive coach. And I think Texas A&M is a team that's actually going to be a little bit better offensively than defensively this season. I know Mike Elko wants to be a defensive-minded program, but man, Marcel Reed, having some wide receivers to work with. I really like Klein, the offensive coordinator. And last week, everything looked really good for Reed. I mean, he threw for 290 yards and 4 touchdowns, ran for another 40 yards. I think that they're going to have a ton of success, maybe score 35 plus against this Utah State team. And I think that the other Aggies are going to do just enough for it to go over.
Well, I'm sure Dave Tooley's happy to hear the dogs barking. Zach, we appreciate a couple of minutes. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to talk to you, buddy. At Betting on X, up on Twitter, and not a shot. It's a reference to Dave Tooley. He really likes those dogs. A dog or pass mentality, which, by the way, you can find his work and other work up at VSiN.com, as well as our Average Joe's contest. Go to VSiN.com/Joe, free to play, weekly and quarterly prizes, as well as a spot in next year's Circa Invitational Pros contest. You prove yourself. You think you're better than the experts? Go to VSiN.com/Joe and enter.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Last 15 minutes of the program. Coming up next, Follow the Money. Boys will have a great show for you leading into, we should note, by the way, the first weekend of our NFL programming. That's going to be a ton of fun. Stormy and I usually in controls of the first hours leading up to kickoff. Mitch and Paul will be with you starting at 6 a.m. Pacific time as well. So very excited for the weekend that will be as we get ready for the first true week of NFL action. Season, of course, got started yesterday. So here we have our best bets. So let's dive into them before we get into some other details. Best bets, of course, brought to you by G-Bank, the official bank of VSiN. G-Bank, built with sports bettors in mind. Right now, you can earn a $50 cash reward bonus once you're approved and your account is open with a G-Bank Visa signature card. While most credit cards treat sportsbook and gaming transactions as cash advances, even when it's your own money, G-Bank treats them as regular purchases. It means no cash advance fees, saving up to a 3 to 5% on every deposit. Plus, you'll earn 1% cash back on all eligible sportsbook and gaming transactions and 2% cash back on everything else you buy. Apply now at VSiN.com/GBank. That is VSiN.com/GBank. Let's start in the National Football League and what we've got for week one heading into it. This is when we're finally here. I made this bet back in, I think, July, and it hasn't really moved that much, although I have gotten the best of it in that the market has kind of come off the key number. It's a juice 2.5 or 3 everywhere else. So for week one, Jets +3 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Aside, I've cooled on a little bit. Obviously, no Elijah Vera Tucker. That's going to be a pretty big deal in a matchup like this. Didn't really love the play of Justin Fields in the preseason, but Fields does provide something for you. The mobility is there. The ability to now on fourth downs, which Aaron Glenn has espoused that he's going to go for on more often and try to kind of push the envelope there, a la Dan Quinn a season ago. Fields' mobility will allow these drives to continue, and there is something to be said for a quarterback that in his last 6 starts is 4-2, dating back to his time starting for the Chicago Bears. Don't really love it. It's one of the sides I've cooled on the most, but it's in there already. So Jets +3 for week one. Panthers +3.5 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Questions about whether Ike Ekwonu is going to start at left tackle. If you look at some of the underlying metrics for Ekwonu, not the best pass blocker in the National Football League by any stretch. I don't think it's the biggest loss in the world if he's not going to be available. This is real trust in the improvement that Bryce Young had down the stretch. And the Panthers themselves, from that game in Germany against the New York Giants and on, this was the best cover team in the National Football League, failed just one time against the spread, and that was when they were favorites against the Dallas Cowboys, if you remember, back at home in one of those spots. So a big one for the Panthers I think they can pull off here. Couple of teasers to throw out there as well. Raiders and Broncos, teasing the Raiders up to 8.5, Broncos down to -2. We had discussed this a couple of days ago. I think the Broncos are the strong leg that you want to use here for a teaser. If you can find a shop that charges you an adequate amount, that's not too expensive. But I wanted to take advantage of that situation that the Broncos find themselves in. Somehow, the rookie quarterback on the road playing in that altitude against the Denver Broncos, where that situationally seems to be one of the worst you can, I think, put together for a week one. I think the Broncos will be able to take care of that instead of laying the bloated number, which I still think you can lay some alt numbers there if you want to get up to like 13.5 at a plus price for Denver. Instead, we use the Broncos as a strong leg there. Also, it seems got the best of it for the other teaser, which is Broncos -2 and Seahawks up to 8.5. This is one we talked about yesterday as well. The reason why this looks at least good for right now is the fact that there are questions about whether or not Christian McCaffrey is going to play, as he popped up on the injury report yesterday with a lingering calf issue he's been dealing with, and this number got down to 1. here at Circa earlier today. So 2 teasers in, Broncos -2, Raiders +8.5, and Broncos -2, Seahawks +8.5 for the week. Cowboys +8.5, one we put in yesterday. That gets done. George Pickens does not get over 55.5. Logic was there. Adoree Jackson was not good in that game, but we didn't see Pickens get matched up with Jackson enough. And the additions for today, Colts in a pick against the Miami Dolphins. I will very much push back on this sentiment. Again, it's just been out there that this Colts team from a roster standpoint is, I don't know, one of the worst in the NFL. I just don't think that's the case. This is a team that was within shooting distance of a playoff berth each of the last 2 years with, we can call, very subpar quarterback play. Miami Dolphins secondary, I think, is going to be one of the worst in the National Football League. We'll see if they can mask that a little bit with a pass rush that, when everybody is healthy, I stress that because got a lot of guys coming off of some serious injuries, to ask immediately in week 1, hey, come out and be your best version of yourself in a regular season matchup. I think there's certainly a reality where some of the edge rushers for Miami that we have questions about in terms of their health come out and by the end of the year are exactly what we expect them to be. But at the beginning of the year, I'll test that theory that this secondary Miami's going to trot out there is very much going to be stressed. And that ties into this other best bet too. Josh Downs over 44.5 receiving yards. By all accounts, we're going to see a 5th-round rookie starting at nickel corner for the Miami Dolphins. I don't think Josh Downs is one of the best wide receivers for the Indianapolis Colts. I think he is the best wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. And I think that this is going to be a matchup in which he thrives. Over 44.5 receiving yards you can find out there for Josh Downs in this matchup. So best bets one more time to rattle off quickly. Jets +3, Panthers +3.5, a pair of teasers, Broncos, Raiders, and then Broncos, Seahawks, and then Colts pick and Josh Downs over 44.5 receiving yards for week 1 in the NFL. To college, to rattle off a couple of plays for the weekend. 5-5 in college after week 1. So gave away the juice there, down about 0.4 units after the first week and week 0 as well in college football. UCLA -2 against UNLV, added the over at 54.5. Nico Yamaleava is in a spot now where I think he's going to be able to execute this offense for UCLA. If you go back to that matchup against Utah, he was pressured on over 40% of his dropbacks. That is not going to happen here against UNLV. And the, I think, small diamond in the rough, the little shiny spot for UCLA is that he actually posted an above average PFF passing grade against Utah. It was just that he was so under duress on almost every single snap, nearly half of them, that you didn't get to execute the way that you wanted. You also fell into a hole, and all of a sudden, all hell broke loose for UCLA. I don't think that's happening here against UNLV. I think the mark is shortened up a little bit, should be over the key number. Give me UCLA -2 and the over in the matchup at 54.5. We'll go with Sam Houston +7 in the nightcap against Hawaii. Very, very questionable number, I think, given that this was a number that was floating around 2 when they were taking on Stanford, and that's when Mike Alejado was at full strength. Now we don't even know if the kid's going to play, and we're getting a full 7. I watched Sam Houston up close against UNLV. There were some opportunities that they couldn't take advantage of. I don't think that there are 7 points worse here in this spot against Hawaii, given the situation at quarterback. Michigan on the road against Oklahoma. I'll test the theory. I thought it was great. We talked earlier today with Ryan McIntyre. It's a great point to invoke what we saw earlier last week when you rattle off all these guys making their first true starts on the road. But this is the second start for Bryce Underwood. If you really dig into the start in the game against New Mexico was thoroughly dominated by Michigan. This team had 2 touchdown drives, buoyed by trick plays and some penalties and questionable, not even questionable, plays that should have been called back that were not because of the ability of New Mexico to get to the line of scrimmage and snap a ball fast enough. Michigan, I think, to downgrade this team to where we had this at 3 initially, to get this up to 5.5, 5, I think it's too much. I think Oklahoma and Michigan are equals to one another. I was very impressed by Underwood. I'll take my shot here with Michigan +5. I don't love this one. North Carolina -13.5. Chapel Bill will trust him against Charlotte. The reason why I don't really love this so much is the recent news. This nonsense that he's banning the New England Patriots from coming in and scouting his team. Can we focus for 1 second, as you continuously fail at the tail end of your career, for 1 second, can we focus on football? But it's just not the case. This guy has seemingly jumped the shark. But having said that, I'm going to calm myself down here. You're taking on Charlotte. This is not a good situation for the 49ers, who looked abhorrent on offense. This number was initially 19 at some spots. We're down to 13.5 underneath the key number. We're still 13.5 across the board. The market at least deemed that 12.5 was a little too cheap. If it's under 14, I'll give a shot that North Carolina can bounce back here in the spot. There will be motivation to do so as well. And then Central Michigan, let's just test the theory. I mean, this is the beginning of the year. Let's just test to see if maybe I'm right, that there's something here with the chips. I really enjoyed watching that effort against San Jose State. That is a unique power run scheme. They played 3 quarterbacks in the game against San Jose State. This is going to be a somewhat difficult matchup to get ready for if you're talking about on the road, or should be at home with Pitt, but also being sandwiched in between some pretty tough spots, including, of course, looking into West Virginia next week. I think Central Michigan is going to be one of those sneaky teams. I think they're well coached. I think they're going to be a pain in the ass. And to be able to stay inside of 3 touchdowns is something I will ask it to do. Was as high as 23.5 earlier this week, starting to head back down in that direction. All right, so real quick, UCLA -2, UCLA UNLV over 54.5, Sam Houston catching 7, Michigan +5, North Carolina -13.5, and then Central Michigan catching 22.5. For those that care, let's see, the contest card for this week in college football, Ole Miss -10, North Carolina 13.5, Michigan, Iowa State, Kansas, UCLA, and Sam Houston State as well. So some crossover with some of the best bets. All right, we're all done here on Money Moves. Crew, appreciate it. As always, did a fantastic job. Football is here. I'll be around here over the weekend. Very much looking forward to it. Just stocking the strip. Coming up next, Follow the Money. Guys will have you getting ready for the weekend. And then very excited for this. Coming up at 7 p.m. Eastern, Friday, Football Invitational is back, followed by our Sports Gambling Podcast, boys. Stay tuned, folks. We'll see you.